Neil, how are you?
I'm well, Warren. Well, good to see you.
Good to see you again, yes. Now, the Oracle, I've seen it, but not yet used it. Wait, are you the chief designer on this?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call myself the chief designer, but yeah, it was my concept from the beginning.
That sounds like a chief designer, doesn't it? If it's your concept from the beginning.
In terms of trying to make it familiar for an engineer, I mean, basically you can look at a strip in the control surface and it is a typical channel strip in terms of the controls you've got and the signal flow, really. So there's gain controls at the top of the channel strip, there's a filter section, there's auxiliary sends, a 4-band EQ, large fader and a large fader pan control, and pretty much that gives you the sort of the bare bones of the channel strip in the control surface. The mechanism that we can use to look at those channels in more detail is a thing called a detail view. So basically, by selecting a channel, I can bring up the settings of that channel across the whole of the display.
So you've gone here, you've gone channel detail view.
Yeah.
So you've hit that, then you've selected the channel down here, and if you look over here, it disappears. So now you're looking at what you would traditionally, I mean, obviously this is the same layout you'd expect on a traditional SSL console, but now you get a full-blown.
Yeah. So this gives you a way to kind of oversee, I mean, you can kind of see it from the display really, but if you were to lay out all of these controls in a line, you'd have quite a big channel strip. So this gives you a sort of compromise of the amount of controls that you access in the control surface versus the amount of processing that you actually have.
Something I didn't ask you when we were talking about the tech stuff is, you're saying it's saving all the time.
Yeah.
It's great, but traditionally I would save like snapshots and moments in time. Can I do that as well? Can I go there and go, this is like mix 72?
Yeah.
Recall 89, and type that in.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a snapshot control over here, so you can basically save snapshots over here. So if I say store snapshot or say a new snapshot, then it takes another snapshot.
Great.
So and I can name them and I can edit the orders and all that sort of stuff. So the other thing that's quite interesting about the channel architecture is that it is an inline channel architecture. So there is a large fader path and a small fader path. That's kind of SSL parlance for the two paths. I mean, you might refer to them as record path and a monitor path, and it's purely dictated about which input is feeding which of those paths fundamentally. But another nice thing about this display is that it shows you the kind of routing and the signal flow through both of those paths, and you can see the settings of both the large fader paths. There's a set of quick controls here. What these do is they change what's on the faders basically. So normally it's a large fader. If I press the SF button, it brings a small fader to the control surface. And equally, if I press the aux button, it brings the auxes to the control surface. And then I've got the selection of my auxes on the left-hand side here. So fundamentally, it gives you sort of control over quite a lot of what you might typically want to control on faders, and uses the kind of digitally controlled analog aspects of things to do that. One of the other things is that as you touch things in the display, a few things happen. Firstly, at the bottom of the display here, it shows you the value of the thing that you're adjusting. You can see in the display here that it highlights the control that I'm adjusting specifically. And the other thing that happens with this display, when this display is active, is it brings into play this Navigator Control, which is on the right-hand side of the bay. And this little red dot here is basically a dot that you can move to any control or switch that's in the channel strip and control it. So what you might have noticed, if you're an SSL, and you will be familiar with a lot of this basically, but for those people who are familiar with SSL EQs, typically in the mid-bands they have 3 controls, and the way that this works in Oracle is that there are 3 controls, but the frequency control switches between control of the frequency and control of the Q. So you'll notice that this highlighted control here is sat over the Q. So basically if I press on this now I've got Q control here and I've got frequency control here. So I want to adjust the two things simultaneously. Basically by doing this I can play with both of these things at the same time. For convenience, you can store that position into one of these quick memories here, so it doesn't matter where I am, and where I am in the channel strip. If I press that, it brings me back to that Q control. And there's another sort of use of that might be for mic gain. If you're doing a record setup session and you just always want to get back to the gain control, then that's another way that you can do that.
Great, yeah. So I can go, here's my kick coming in, press the button, boom.
Exactly.
I've got that gain always,
You start to get into a lot of benefits from the digital control of the analog circuits in terms of one of the sort of philosophies that there are in a lot of the control surface is that in a situation where you want to A/B something, that there are basically switches that allow you to do that. So an example, in terms of the inline channel path, there are inserts in both the large fader path and the small fader path, when there are direct outputs from both those paths as well.
Right.
But in a situation where you were mixing, for example, so you're using both paths to feed the mix, you've got different processing inserted in each one of those paths. There's a switch here that allows you to switch the insert in and out. So if you want to compare with or without that processing, then you can do that. There's another quite interesting little feature. Well, there's quite interesting little features in the EQ section.
Oh, yeah.
One of them is these order switches. So fundamentally, a classic thing might be you've got dynamics in your insert, so you're switching your dynamics in and out of circuit, but the EQ and the dynamics quite often are things that you might want to compare in terms of where they are in the channel strip. This order button basically moves the EQ up and down the processing. So if you look at this display here, you can see at the moment the EQ is before the insert. If I move it down, the EQ is now after the insert.
Good.
So
I like
between
that.
these in and outs and these up and down buttons, I can compare with or without the insert where that insert is in the channel strip, basically.
Dumb question.
Yeah.
Where are the filters, the high and low pass? Where are they in the chain?
So the channel strip only has a high pass filter, and the high pass filter can be moved, basically.
Good.
So here currently the filter is in this section. The way this works basically is that not only can I get controls here, but I can also control the routing from this this switch here. So basically I can come over here and basically select all of the routing options that there might be for processing in here. For example, if I want to put the filters into the small fader path, then I can choose one of these things where the filter's in the small fader path. So now I've got the filter in the small fader path, and I can see that the insert's before the filter, but equally I have options that can put into the filter before the insert. Pretty much any combination of the filter, the EQ, and the insert can be configured.
Yeah, because on bass guitar, I like to high pass first,
Yeah.
then boost, and bring in a little extra. It nicely controls the roundness underneath. I don't want to be too aggressive out the way of the kick. But on guitars, maybe I do want to be a bit more aggressive to kind of, find that sweet point where it connects with the bass. So I might flip it after. So yeah, that's nice.
And you can do that on a channel by channel basis, basically.
Good.
So and the nice thing about this display, which the concept was kind of inherited from Duality, where we do a similar thing, but it gives you at a glance the signal flow in the channel strip. So
Okay.
So you don't need to sort of interrogate things anymore if you don't want to.
So the Snap store over here, did we cover that?
No, we didn't. But this is basically a way that you can save sort of snapshot channel settings.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a bit of a philosophy in the control surface where if you've got sort of black writing out of a white background, that basically means it's a shift enabled function. So although there's only 3 switches, there's actually 6 of those stores, and similarly for some of the other functions as well, there's sort of shift access functions. One of the other things about the shift control as well, you can see that it's got the shift underneath it, but it's labeled fine on top, and that basically changes the gearing of the control that you've got. So at the moment I've got sort of on a single sort of sweep of the turn, I've got all the gain of the EQ. So depending on the EQ type, but from -15 to +15, which is quite a wide range. But basically, if I press the shift control and adjust the gain control, I reduce the resolution of that significantly. So I've now got a sort of 1/10 of a dB adjustment as opposed to a several dB adjustment.
Nice.
Some other sort of digitally controlled analog benefits are that I can also link settings in the channel strip as well. So on the right hand side here, we've got a function called Quick Link. If I enable Quick Link and then select channels, it basically, whatever I select, it puts together and links together all of the processing that's in those channels. So now that the Quick Link is active and this pink thing, and there's a display here that shows you that we're in Quick Link mode, all of these channels are now going to act at the same time. And you'll notice that it retains the offset between whatever settings I've got. So equally, if I'm adjusting pans, it will adjust pans with the offset, and EQs as well with the offset. So for example, if I've got a string section, I just want to make the string section a little brighter, I can just Quick Link together. You just adjust the HF EQ on one of them, sure. It'll offset adjust all of the other HF EQs.
Right.
And then
and leave everything else in place. Yeah.
And leave everything else, yeah. And the moment you release Quick Link, it dissolves that link.
It creates groups without you having to create a group.
Yeah, temporarily.
It creates temporary groups. Yeah, I like that idea.
And then, and they're called quick links, and there is another type of link called a process link, which is a permanent link, basically. Right. So there's a couple of ways that you can control signals. I mean, so you could make stereo channels. So some of these channels in the control surface are configured as stereo, and you can see that because they've got stereo meters as opposed to like the bass, the kick and the snare here, which are mono meters.
Speaking of groups, etc. So I mean, what's great about this is like my old console, I loved it, had VCAs.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, yeah, but that's nice. So I can do the drum push into the chorus, you know, like this. I could do little guitar pushes, and that was all fantastic. And maybe come up in the chorus and then back down in the verse. Loved all of that. But I also wanted to compress. I wanted to parallel compress something. I wanted to do that. And so then I had to start using faders. And so now I'm losing like 2 channels to have parallel drums.
Yeah.
But this can do both.
Yeah, indeed. So we've got basically 16 channels that are configured as 8 stereo, and I call them flex groups, because depending on where you're getting your input from, that dictates what you're going to be using them for. So the input can be from an external input. So if you're using from reverb returns or something like that, then that's one way to use them. But the other thing, getting to the point that you're making really, is that they can pick up the track buses. So basically the 8 returns can pick up track buses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up to 16 on these 8 stereo returns. And just like we had a detailed view for the channel strip, there's a detailed view for the stereo returns as well. So on this display here, I can see all of the sort of settings that are available in my stereo returns, and there's quite a lot of flexibility in here. So they can source from the track buses. They can also route to the main buses or to the track buses. So you can create a hierarchy of groups as well if you want to. The groups themselves have got some interesting stuff within them. And basically there is the ability to control, again, from this encoder any particular parameter that I want. But the stereo groups, there's an insert point on each of those stereo groups. And there's also an image control on the input side of the stereo groups as well. So basically, I've got a width control here. And this sort of display shows me what's going on, basically. So I can narrow the image from stereo down to mono. I can bring it back out to left-right stereo, but I can also introduce some phase inversion to give me a sort of extra wide stereo effect. Right. Something else that the use of that image control can do is it can basically MS encode as well. So it can basically take your left-right source, encode sum and difference, so mid and side. That mid and side is ahead of the insert point. So that means that you can send out of your insert point in mid-side. So you can process your side and your mid independently through different dynamics units, for example. And then when you come back into the return, there's an MS decoder on the return side. So basically, by switching this MS decode in, I can turn that back into left-right stereo. You could take your drum bus, mid-side it, compress, just the mono elements, turn it back into left-right stereo, and then route it to your main mix.
What I love is here, where my brain's going is with analog gear. So I could say, well, here's my drum bus, which I'm going to have, a stereo compressor on, analog stereo compressor on, maybe some EQ, and that's my main drum bus. Then I'm going to have a crush. I'm going to also send it to here and crush the schnizzle out of it, and then maybe I'll have a widening one or something like that, and then I sit there between all these elements. But it's all analog. I'm accessing all my analog equipment to do this. And then, of course, I could just print that back into a stereo thing, and that's what I love, this idea of being able to digitally access any of my analog equipment and have like a crush bus that I'm going to use on the drums, and maybe I'll print that, but that's my crush bus for anything. I want to have a piano crush, and boom. I think what I would do if I had the console is I would rebuild, this is just me, I would rebuild my SSL mix with all my outboard. But what tends to happen is when you're in a fully analog world, which I love, I very rarely changed anything.
Okay. Yeah.
I just kind of was like, I had a crush. I used to use a 162, a stereo 160, to actually crush cymbals. Right. And I had it was Jack Douglas's thing, and he liked the way you could take overheads and crush them and get to the point where the kit started to expand inside of it and kind of get this, all this, and we'd have about that, it'd be that loud.
Right. Yeah.
But then that 162, it was permanently...
Yeah, that was its setting.
That was all it was ever used for. Yeah. And that's great.
Yeah.
But then you get to this ridiculous situation where suddenly you have 100 pieces of analog equipment that only do one job. Right. So this is really super interesting.
So we're starting to get into talking about the center section of the bus structure, basically. So we've got the stereo returns, the bus structure itself. One of the nice things about this center section display is it basically shows you all of the buses all of the time. So it's quite easy to explain what the bus structure is in the console. So we've got 4 main stereo buses. We've got 10 auxiliary buses that in this session are configured as 4 stereo pairs and 2 monos. We've got our 16 track buses, again, that feed into the stereo returns. And if we had routed them there, we'd bring those up on the stereo return meters. So you can see all of those meters all the time. And it's an easy way to know that the console's got 4 stereo main buses, 10 auxiliary buses, 16 track buses, and these 4 stereo group inputs. You then start to get into some interesting possibilities in terms of like the main mix buses. So there are 4 stereo main mix buses, three of those stereo mix buses, so mix buses B, C and D, can fold into mix bus A, and mix bus A is kind of the master stereo mix bus, and that's where there is the bus processing for, which is, sort of classic SSL consoles would have bus processing on their main mix bus.
Fantastic.
And Oracle is no different to that. These controls on the right-hand side, basically the 6 blue controls are completely analogous to the SSL bus compressor, and you'll see that there's a compression meter up in the meter bridge.
So it's your 4000 you all know and love, but with the addition of 2 wonderful things.
Yeah, and yes, indeed. So there's a mix control, and there's also a high-pass filter in the side chain as well that you can switch in and out. But in fact, what this is the kind of the surface controls for a much deeper bus processing system. So you may be familiar with an evolution of the SSL bus compressor that we launched as a standalone RAG Bus Plus, indeed. Yeah. And there is basically a full Bus Plus within the main mix bus of Oracle. And again, there's this screen view. This brings up the detail view. So this detail view shows me all of the settings that I've got in my Bus Plus. So here are my bus compressor controls, and they interact with the controls in the surface. But in terms of setting things like different sidechain modes, adding different VCA models into the bus compression, and the dynamic EQ that is also part of Bus Plus. So we've got an LF and a HF dynamic EQ. And then again, going back to the sort of A/B comparison thing, switch controls for all of those things in the front panel. So bus compressor in and out, HF dynamic EQ in and out, LF dynamic EQ in and out, and then the inserts.
Which of course is fantastic, because if I use this sidechain high pass there, so maybe I want to come up, let the bass and the kick breathe to come up to say maybe 120 or above, somewhere in that area. So that's not triggering the compressor, allowing that low end to just kind of breathe, add the excitement of the mids and above being, attacked a bit more aggressively. And then maybe, I'll want to keep it 100% wet and destroy it, listening to it, get it absolutely destroyed, and then start dialing it back. But because I've got a way of inserting another compressor afterwards, if I had an external bus compressor, another 4000, I could set that more aggressively in more of a limit mode and stick that on the end to just catch some peaks.
Yeah.
So Bob's your uncle.
Exactly.
Happy bunny. I've got pretty much a mastered track coming out the other end.
Yeah. The 2 inserts are interesting in that one is a pre-fader insert, the other is a post-fader insert. So again, the post-fader insert, you can ride a fader into that second. And you can also do a thing that you used to be able to do on the 4000 console, where that also had a pre-VCA and a post-VCA insert point, which meant that in a tracking session, you could patch across that processing and basically then use that processing in you could put them on stereo groups, for example. So
I would do post-fade, not just because of that. I mean, I would want an external to be post all of that. Yeah. So I could use the parallel function and really dial it in the way I want.
The huge benefit of this console in terms of, this ability for channels to route to pretty much any and all of those mix buses, the stereo group, the track buses to be picked up by the stereo returns, the ability to fold those stereo buses into the main stereo bus. You set all that up, you get the session all set, you save it. You don't need to worry about it after that point. You recall it, it'll all come back for you. So in terms of building quite a sophisticated mix process and structure to what you're doing, this console, takes a huge amount of weight off the shoulders of someone trying to recall that's those settings and that setup. And equally, you're going from a mix session to a tracking session. You've got your tracking preset set up. You call your tracking. It puts all of the processing and all of the routing in the places that you want it to do, and you're ready to track. It's a big difference. And and the huge benefit of analog in that world is that latency issues don't exist as far as building parallel mixes, bringing
digital, just controlling it. It's not in the signal path.
Exactly.
Which is beautiful. Yeah, that's a big deal. Well, this is the analog portion of the console sitting inside here.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so the analog processing lives in these 2 racks, and the number of racks kind of depends on the size of the system. So right-hand side rack here is the center section processing. So this is basically where all the buses are and those stereo groups. So they all live in this rack. And this left-hand rack is the channels. So basically, this is sort of the way they normally look. If I take this cover off, we can basically see the actual channel processing cards themselves. So each one of these cards, I mean, basically all these LEDs on the front are telling me that the power supplies are okay and everything's good in the rack. Each one of these cards is 2 inline channels. So there are 4 analog paths in each card. So there's 12 cards, so 2 channels per card means this is a 24 channel system. Each of those channels is an inline channel. So in terms of mix capacity, this basically gives you 48 paths to the mix bus. And you can optionally add a second one of these racks as well. So that will double that capacity. So it gives you basically 48 analog channels and potentially 96 paths to mix. And the rack is fairly self-contained. The distance between the control surface and this rack is not really of any particular issue. So basically there's an Ethernet cable, and that Ethernet cable can be quite some length. These racks, basically the buses interconnect between these racks. So these racks need to be within 12 meters of one another, but typically in installations that doesn't prove to be an issue.
And these are all D sub or sub D?
Yeah, they are.
D-sub,
yeah. I think it's AES 59, which is basically a Tascam format that gives you 8 channels per D sub, and it's all balanced as well. So everything in the console is balanced. And if you think about analog consoles, the analog wiring goes to the back of the control surface typically.
Sure.
So these racks are actually designed in a situation where you don't want to rewire a whole facility.
Sure.
These racks can actually fit underneath the control surface. So they cool from the front and they exhaust out of the top and the back. But basically you can sit them with enough D-room so you can sit them underneath the console. So in terms of fitting into an existing space, it's perfectly feasible to do that.
Great.
But equally, if you want to sort of restructure a facility and put these in, or like we have in this room, we've put them in the wall. So that's perfectly feasible to do. In terms of service, I mean, literally everything's designed to mount in and out from the front of the racks. So if you need to change cards or something, you basically unscrew it and pull it out the front. Once the racks are installed, you kind of don't need to worry about getting them out again. They can live there forever, basically. Yeah, I mean, SSL have had sort of thoughts about making a digitally controlled analog console for decades in many senses of the word. But one of the challenges that we faced in doing that was we didn't feel the technology was right at the time. Processing speeds, the sort of granularity of control were all things that we felt would make a digitally controlled analog console kind of feel too digital and not feel enough analog. But obviously, the world's moved a long way in terms of processing speeds. And we've done quite a lot of digitally controlled analog technology within some of our other products. So if you look at Bus Plus, for example, that uses digitally controlled analog to give the precision that's necessary for getting stereo controls within tenths of a dB rather than several dBs of tracking accuracy between controls. So yeah, so digital controlled analog technology has moved a long way. We've done a lot of work sort of fairly recently on digitally controlled EQs so that we could basically bring to market a product that was a mixing console that in essence is designed to be an evolution of a product range that we've made for, well, 20 some odd years now, which is our AWS product range. When we go back a long time in history, SSL is kind of renowned for making large studio mixing consoles.
Just a bit, yeah, just a bit.
And that whole industry has sort of gone through a revolution in tape machines being replaced effectively by digital audio workstations. That technological change has kind of also heralded the ability for producers and creators to work from home in smaller rooms. And this is kind of a typical example of a high-end sort of producer room. AWS fits that footprint and that room footprint really well. And Oracle's designed as an evolution of that to continue that heritage, if you like, of consoles for those kinds of rooms. A challenge with those kinds of rooms is that they're pretty much single room facilities. So machine rooms are a challenge, and that's why the sort of technology, and that's part of the challenge in terms of designing the technology, is making that technology able to be fit within a room.
Well, I know with my 4000, my power supplies were in this huge container with its own AC unit, which was in the bathroom.
Right.
So when you went to the bathroom, you heard, but I wasn't gonna like knock down the building and build whatever. Yeah. Thing that we were talking about earlier that I find most intriguing is the full recallability, obviously, so given with digital, but the fact that you can assign anything anywhere. For instance, this channel has a Pultec EQ on it because it was my bass channel last week.
Yeah.
And I've also, and I've got whatever things inserted to it. I can say, well, I want to use that on my vocal and just reassign it to be the vocal channel. Yeah. Also make it appear first if I want it to be the lead vocal, or last, or whatever it might be. Yeah. So that's the great thing. It suddenly means that it becomes intuitive. Once you've got a lot of stuff plugged in, you've got a bit of time on it, I can see where my brain's going to go. I'm going to be like, okay, it means that my patch bay could be permanently set. Yeah. And then I just go and choose this channel for do this thing and that channel to do that thing.
Once you start to sort of scope out the possibilities of, some people will come to something like Oracle from an analog background where essentially the wires that connect to the back of the control surface dictate what signals are going through the channel strips. Sure. But digitally controlled analog technology kind of breaks all of that apart.
It's like having a digital patch bay and a console.
Yeah, because basically,
all built into one.
Exactly. You can direct the signals that control the electrons going through the analog electronics through either through the control surface or from the control of the processing that you're connected to. Right. And that's a big difference between Oracle and a sort of traditional analog mixing console, in that basically the thing that we're stood in front of here is a control surface that is connected on a Cat5 cable to the boxes that are at the back of the room, which are basically the processing racks, where we've got the analog processing for the center section, and we've got the analog processing for the channels as well. Part of our challenge was to make the look and feel of the control surface feel like an analog mixing console, but deliver all of the benefits that digital control could bring you, exactly like you say, in terms of not necessarily having a one-to-one relationship in terms of what signals you've got in which channel strips. And sort of to that end, obviously from a hardware perspective, we've got a control surface and we've got racks. From a software perspective, we've got software that runs in the control surface to make it look and feel like an analog mixing console. But we also have applications. We've got an application called Control, which basically can be used to set up and can be used for project recall and snapshots and all of those other benefits that digital resettable technology.
And we were chatting about the possibility of, just having that on your laptop.
It's designed as an offline application, and it's designed to sort of live with your DAW. So this is the Control application. So on the left-hand side of the screen, I've got my project management here, so I can basically instantly recall any sort of projects that I want to work with. So I can just open, and a huge list of projects appear that I can pick from at any point. But also I can control the processing from here. So at the moment, I've got sort of my audio piles. I can name all my tracks here. I can link together odd and even channels, or also I can make sort of stereo channels in the channel.
You make any stereo channel like that.
Yeah, exactly. Similarly, managing the buses in the console as well. I can link together my auxes to be mono buses or stereo buses, kind of at will, really. And then the huge benefit of having done all that setup work is you basically save your project and it remembers everything. But one of the sort of other features of this, what we have here is that these applications are running in the same computer that we're running the Pro Tools system from. And in some ways this harks back to the very early days of SSL consoles, where we had a computer where you had a program reel, which was the software, and you had a reel disk, which was where all the session information was stored. And one of the benefits of that approach was that when somebody went away from the studio and they took their multi-track reel, the session information on that floppy disk could live in the same box basically as the multi-track.
Well, I had a G, not a G+, so
okay.
My were 8-inch floppies.
8-inch floppies, yeah, indeed.
And a very specific one as well. Yeah. They made about, I don't know, I'm going to exaggerate, like 20 different types of 8-inch floppies.
Yeah, they had to be
one work.
Yeah, it was single density, I can't remember what it exactly was, but it was definitely, it was
If I found anybody who had them, I'd just go, how many have you got? They go 40. I'm going to buy them all.
But one of the interesting sort of side benefits of that approach is it means that there's no footprint left behind of the session in the studio that you were just working in. Yeah. So if somebody's coming in, you know, and this is when you get into a situation where the technology allows you to change sessions more quickly, this is actually quite a nice benefit in that the software that's managing the session lives on the same laptop that your workstation may well be running from. It means that all of that intellectual property goes away with you when you leave a dry hire studio. And so, you know, if you're working on a sort of a significant artist, when someone else comes in to use the console, then they can't look down a list of files and see what else has been going on in the facility, sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, the offline benefits also means that you can prepare sessions before you actually get to the studio. And basically the way that it works is that you connect your laptop up, the laptop sits on the network sees the control surface or the console. If I pull this up here, because we're connected to a whole pile of different consoles in this system. So if I select connect here, I've got a whole bunch of surfaces and systems that I can see from here because they live on the network around the facility. And I can just basically pick up and connect to any one of those that I want to. What happens when you do that is that basically the laptop says to the console, I want to connect to you. The console says, somebody's trying to connect to you. Do you want to allow this? And you have to accept it for that communication then to get established. But the moment you do that, the surface and the application basically talk to each other all the time. So you could load a project in, completely reset the setup of the session. So in some ways, this is, you know, it's great for sort of studios where you've got a lot of turnover of sessions, but it also is interesting for like students and education where you've got rooms that have, you know, you want to have a multiple turnover of students being able to use it during the day, basically. But as I say, they can prepare stuff offline, come in, connect to the control surface.
Neil, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Warren. It's been a pleasure.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, indeed.
So, of course, if there's any comments and questions, please leave them down below and I'll try and get Neil to answer them.